The first rumors about freezing people seemed like pure science fiction. But as early as the 1960s, there were those who chose the cold for a chance at future life. One of the most famous cases is the story of James Bedford, an American professor of psychology. In January 1967, his body was, for the first time in history, placed in a cryogenic capsule filled with liquid nitrogen. His son and colleagues watched as the professor's body temperature dropped to minus 321 degrees Fahrenheit. This procedure lasted several hours. Journalists surrounded the apparatus, and everything that was happening looked more like a science fiction movie than a real medical operation. Soon after, new applications followed. Doctors, engineers, and ordinary citizens signed contracts to have their own bodies preserved, hoping that science would be able to bring them back in the future. Another high-profile case was that of American entrepreneur Thomas Donaldson, who suffered from a brain tumor and in the 1990s began actively fighting for his right to cryopreservation. Donaldson even went to court to gain the right to be frozen before his official death. This case was widely discussed in the media and became a starting point for debates about the boundaries of medicine and law. The database of cryogenic patients was growing. By the early 2000s, the largest center in Arizona already had more than 100 clients on ice. Among them were people of different ages, professions, and nationalities. From millionaires willing to invest thousands of dollars in their future chances to young people whose relatives hoped to one day bring them back to life. What happened behind the doors of the cryolab remained a mystery to most. But many prominent figures, such as the famous mathematician Eliezer Yanikov, did not hide their plans and publicly declared they trusted freezing technology more than conventional medicine. By the early 2000s, the number of people wishing to live on ice was already in the hundreds worldwide. Meanwhile, as new volunteers were filling out paperwork, scientists were making their first attempts not only to freeze but also to bring organisms back to life, which led to real sensations in the scientific world. The first awakening. Experiments that changed everything. When the first volunteers were signing contracts for cryopreservation, scientists wasted no time and searched for a way not only to freeze, but to actually bring back to life at least something larger than a single cell. In the early 1980s, experiments on animals began in California laboratory. Hamsters and rabbits were placed in ice baths, lowering their temperature almost to the point of freezing, and then attempts were made to revive them. Microscopic blood vessels were filled with special chemical solutions to prevent ice from tearing the tissues apart. After thawing, some of the animals really did come back to life and even ran around their cages. Although the consequences of such journeys were visible to the naked eye, convulsions, neurological disorders, and sometimes loss of certain functions. American biologist Robert Ettinger, one of the founders of cryonics, personally oversaw experiments on freezing mice using a special glycerin-based compound. In some experiments, after deep cooling, individual organs of the animals did indeed start functioning again. Engineers from Detroit achieved a breakthrough in the early 90s when a dog's heart, after prolonged cryopreservation, started beating again following proper thawing. For the first time, a vital organ came back to life after a long stay in ice, and this was captured on camera. During the same period, a group of doctors from North Carolina was freezing human embryos. Just a few years after thawing, some of these embryos successfully implanted and resulted in the birth of children. This outcome became an international sensation and confirmed that individual human cells and tissues can indeed not only be preserved, but also brought back to life months or even years later. At the same time, laboratories in Arizona were attempting to reverse freeze the brains of laboratory animals. Scientists recorded neuronal activity after the icy slumber, checking whether memory or basic reflexes could survive the extreme cold. Despite intense media interest, most actual experiments were kept secret, and laboratory journals were filled with dry protocols. Minus 321 degrees Fahrenheit, solution composition, thawing time. Entire teams of biologists and physicists worked on each experiment, trying to find the perfect balance of chemicals, time, and temperature. Every successfully revived rabbit or organ functioning after freezing marked a new step toward the ultimate dream to one day bring a human back to life. However, there was still a vast gulf before the true resuscitation of adult humans could be achieved, and the next task for researchers was to find out what actually happens to the body and brain during deep freezing. How does this even work? The chemistry and physics of cryopreservation. Delving into the very essence of cryopreservation, everything begins with one crucial goal: to halt the destructive processes in cells after clinical death. As soon as cardiac arrest is confirmed, the body is quickly placed in ice water to lower the temperature to 41 degrees Fahrenheit. This slows down metabolism and gives scientists time to proceed to the next step, replacing the blood with a special cryoprotective solution. In the first minutes and hours, doctors use pumps to remove most of the fluid from the person's blood vessels and instead introduce chemicals such as glycerin or dimethyl sulfoxide. These molecules fill the spaces between cells and prevent the water inside tissues from turning into sharp ice crystals, which would tear membranes and destroy organs. Then the body temperature drops even lower. First it reaches minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the freezing continues in an atmosphere of liquid nitrogen where the thermometer falls to minus 321 degrees Fahrenheit. At this stage, the entire process becomes almost a dance of physics and chemistry. Scientists monitor the rate of cooling. If it is too fast, dangerous bubbles and cracks form inside the cells, and if it is too slow, the protective solutions do not have time to penetrate deep into the tissues. Perfect freezing requires that each cell is first dehydrated and then instantly covered with a kind of glassy shell. This phenomenon is called vitrification. When vitrification is successful, not a single cell is covered with ice, and the entire tissue becomes similar to amorphous glass, completely halting all biological processes. It is important that during brain cryopreservation, scientists try to protect not just the neurons, but also the billions of connections between them. It is these connections that are responsible for a person's memory and identity. With the help of special pumps and microscopic tubes, cryoprotectants are introduced directly into the blood vessels of the brain, with every fraction of a second carefully calculated. Some protocols require gradually increasing the concentration of chemicals to avoid causing chemical burns or tissue swelling. Every stage is monitored by sensors, pressure, temperature, and the rate at which the solution penetrates. The process concludes with the fully prepared body or isolated brain being hermetically sealed in a steel capsule and immersed in liquid nitrogen. Here, in the conditions of perpetual frost, all the chemistry and physics complete their work. All processes come to a complete halt, down to the atomic level. Theoretically, this frozen state can be maintained for centuries without visible damage, as long as there is no sudden failure of the cooling system. Behind the heavy doors of the cryolab, discussions about the next stage never cease. After all, if the chemistry and physics of freezing have reached perfection, the most difficult question remains: what happens to the brain, and does everything that makes a person an individual persist after the icy slumber? It is precisely the study of the brains of frozen patients that has become the main battleground between advocates of eternal life and those who see cryonics as a ticket to the unknown. Frozen brains. The key to immortality or a ticket to the unknown? While laboratories around the world were perfecting whole-body freezing technologies, the main debates and experiments suddenly shifted to the most complex and mysterious organ, the human brain. As early as the late 1980s, the first attempts at individual brain preservation, or neuropreservation, began in cryonic centers in Arizona and California. Patients who did not want to pay extra for whole-body freezing agreed to preserve only their head or brain, hoping that the secret of their self was hidden there. Microsurgeons worked with jeweler-like precision. After the heart stopped, the head was separated within minutes and immediately connected to IVs with cryoprotectants. One of the first operations of this kind was carefully recorded by camera. Every step, from cooling to packing the brain into a steel capsule, was carried out with almost military discipline. In Stanford laboratories, biologists were able to confirm after several years that, following freezing and properly conducted vitrification, up to 98% of neural connections in rats were preserved. The brains of animals thawed weeks after the experiment looked almost identical to fresh ones under the microscope, and certain areas even retained functionality. Scientists in Detroit took it a step further. They opened the skull, injected dyes into the sealed vessels of the frozen brain, and then confirmed that the memory structure and main neural circuits remained intact. There was a recorded case where, after thawing a dog's brain in the laboratory, basic conditioned reflexes were restored, and the animal recognized signals that had been presented to it earlier. At the same time, methods of gradual thawing were being tested in Cambridge, in which the brain retained up to 90% of the proteins and lipids necessary for transmitting signals between cells. Some brain samples were stored for up to 5 years at a temperature of minus 321 degrees Fahrenheit. After extraction and chemical treatment, they demonstrated the ability for basic electrical activity. This sensation prompted several laboratories on both sides of the Atlantic to launch their own projects on freezing intelligence. Meanwhile, in Arizona, cryolaboratories began offering clients a signature service, freezing only the brain without the rest of the body, while maintaining guarantees of anonymity. The cost of the procedure averaged around $20,000, and the client base was rapidly growing. Medical records show that since the mid-1990s, more than 60 people agreed to neuropreservation in the hope of one day receiving a new body for their brain or an artificial digital environment. However, all these technological advances were accompanied by real risks. At the end of the 1990s, in one of the Texas laboratories, a power system failure caused the temperature in a patient's brain capsule to rise above the critical threshold. A subsequent examination revealed damage to up to 30% of the tissue, and this incident became a real scandal in the world of cryonics. Despite these setbacks, scientists continue to improve sensors and emergency cooling systems to prevent similar disasters from happening again. Today, no team of scientists can state with absolute certainty that the restoration of memory and consciousness from a frozen brain will be possible even if thawing technology becomes perfect, But every successful preservation of neural tissue structure and every new case of basic functions surviving after freezing pushes enthusiasts toward the idea. If the key to immortality is hidden somewhere, it is surely to be found in the mysterious depths of the frozen brain. And it is precisely this infinitely complex question that has sparked heated debates both among scientists and among the millions who look to the ice with hope, seeing it as a last chance. The intrigue surrounding the boundaries of this technology only grows, because with every new case, the risk of mistakes that have become known to the whole world increases as well. Catastrophes and failures. Terrible mistakes in cryogenic laboratories. Despite their successes, cryogenic laboratories have repeatedly faced real disaster. Mistakes here have been far too costly. The most notorious case occurred in the early 2000s in California, when the largest storage facility experienced a failure in its liquid nitrogen supply system. Operators only noticed the drop in levels 2 days later. When the capsule was opened, 15 patients' bodies were found to be partially thawed. Muscles and organs had begun to deteriorate, and signs of necrosis appeared on the skin. The families filed a class action lawsuit, and the laboratory was accused of negligence. Documents and videos from the scene of the incident were made public across the country. The staff had to admit, no guarantees can protect against a simple technical failure. Accidents had happened before as well. In the late 1980s, an Arizona laboratory mixed up the composition of the cryoprotectant solution, which led to the mass death of cells in 3 patients at once. The researchers tried to cover up the tragedy, but soon an independent investigation revealed that instead of providing protection, the chemicals caused severe tissue dehydration and the formation of microcracks throughout the body. One of the biologists who worked on this protocol admitted that it took them 2 years to fix the consequences of this mistake. In the early 90s in Texas, a large-scale power outage paralyzed the operation of freezing units, and almost 10 cryocapsules failed at the same time. Some of the bodies could not be saved. Sensors recorded a temperature rise above minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and ice crystals formed in the tissues, rupturing cell membranes. Inspections revealed that the backup system had been disabled due to budget shortfalls. This incident led to strict changes in all safety protocols across the country. Equally unfortunate were the attempts to revive frozen animals, when a poorly chosen thawing rate resulted in massive internal bleeding. In a Florida laboratory in the early 2000s, when thawing 5 rats at once, scientists recorded the destruction of up to 40% of their blood vessels. The animals did not survive even a day. After that, all thawing methods had to be urgently reviewed. Mistakes were also accumulating in administrative processes. In New York in the early 2000s, the relatives of 2 cryopreserved patients were unable to prove their family relationship, and access to the bodies was lost forever. The laboratory's legal department had not anticipated such force majeure situations, which led to a new wave of lawsuits and insurance claims. Each of these cases was thoroughly investigated and discussed within professional circles, and some became textbook examples for new employees. As a result, most laboratories switched to multiple redundancies for cooling systems, constant online monitoring, and the creation of emergency protocols. Now, even a brief rise in temperature triggers an emergency team dispatch and immediate notification of clients. But despite efforts to secure every capsule, no laboratory can completely eliminate the human or technical factor. All these disasters and failures have forced a re-evaluation of approaches to storage, freezing, and the legal protection of patients. Many innovations in the modern cryogenic industry have arisen directly from attempts not to repeat the mistakes of the past. But even the most advanced systems still do not solve the main question. How truly safe, reliable, and scientifically justified is the storage of a human being in conditions of eternal cold? It is because of this uncertain boundary that things get most interesting. Where does scientific reality end and science fiction begin? This is what we are about to discover in the next stage of this icy experiment. The truth about modern technologies. Where is the line between science fiction and science? Moving to the present day, modern cryogenic technologies have become a true science, but illusions of the future are still closely intertwined with reality. In the largest laboratories of Arizona, California, and Michigan, special teams work around the clock. Each patient is connected to an online monitoring system, and there are enough backup generators to maintain icy stability for weeks, even in the event of a complete power outage. Cooling tanks filled with liquid nitrogen are additionally equipped with thermal sensors, and the capsules are made from high-strength stainless steel. This allows the temperature to be maintained at minus 321 degrees Fahrenheit for decades without human intervention. Each laboratory strictly regulates the time between the declaration of death and the start of cryopreservation. According to protocol, it must not exceed 15 minutes. Every action is scheduled down to the second. The patient's blood is quickly replaced with large volumes of cryoprotectant solution, after which the body or brain is immediately placed into the primary cooling chamber. Cryoprotectant manufacturers are developing new formulas to reduce toxicity and the risk of microfractures. Based on the latest research, new components are added and tested on animals, organs, and human cells. In the United States, by the 2020s, the number of officially cryopreserved patients exceeded 300, and the number of signed contracts surpassed 3,000. In some clinics, up to 30 new preservations are performed annually, and databases contain detailed information about each case. Great attention is paid to legal formalities. The patient's family can appoint a supervisory representative, have access to temperature reports, and regularly receive updates on the condition of the capsule. As part of scientific research, methods for low-temperature storage of complex organs continue to be tested. After freezing and proper thawing, livers and kidneys retain up to 80% of their functions, and in some cases, such organs allow the patient to live for several years after transplantation. However, not a single adult human body has yet been brought back to life. All the achievements of modern cryonics confirm the possibility of preservation, but not the guarantee of revival. Scientific institutions from Europe and Japan are collaborating with American laboratories, combining databases on damaged cells, the chemical composition of protectants, and new thawing algorithms. A laboratory in Tokyo has developed equipment for ultra-fast warming of individual organs using a laser beam, which reduces the risk of ice cracking. Skeptics regularly demand the publication of expert examination results, and every procedure is inspected by independent biologists once every 6 months. Training programs for staff have become mandatory, and access to the capsules is strictly limited by a multi-level security system. Despite technological progress, science honestly acknowledges a complete revival of a person from a state of prolonged cryopreservation has not yet been achieved. There are no confirmed cases of restored memory, consciousness, or all functions of an adult organism. Most of the technologies promoted by the industry as a path to eternal life still remain in the realm of experimental development, not everyday medical practice. These facts clearly delineate the boundaries where real achievements end and promises of the future begin. However, even today, thousands of people are choosing cold, while laboratories continue to refine every detail of the process. The main intrigue lies ahead: will humanity ever succeed in turning ice from a last hope into a true tool for conquering death? To understand this, we need to look into the future, where eternal life is no longer a fantasy but a subject of scientific forecasting. The future of eternal life. What is humanity preparing for? Turning the page to today, scientists around the world are already making plans for decades ahead. After all, every new experiment in the cryonics industry is a step toward the next phase, the creation of technology for the return journey from the cold. At the largest research institutes in Michigan, a project is being developed to restore frozen tissue using nanorobots. These devices, smaller than a speck of dust, are designed to penetrate cells and repair damage caused by ice crystals or chemical changes. Prototypes of these microscopic rescuers have already been tested on animal organs. Individual heart tissues have regained up to 85% of their functionality after being frozen and thawed with the help of the new equipment. At the same time, a group of neurobiologists from Massachusetts is working on decoding the memory matrix. Their task is to copy the structure of connections in the brain and transfer this information to a digital medium even before freezing. Computer simulations have already made it possible to model certain areas of the brains of laboratory mice, and now the team is preparing a new project to transfer similar data from primates. Such experiments are funded not only by government grants but also by private investors. Dozens of startups in Silicon Valley are developing their own systems for recording personalities and creating digital avatars of cryopreserved patients. Meanwhile, in Japan in 2024, engineers demonstrated for the first time a technology for instant cooling using ultra-short laser pulses. This made it possible to freeze thin slices of living tissue so quickly that no ice crystals formed inside the cells at all, and the protein structures were preserved almost perfectly. Tests on organs showed that after such a procedure, liver and kidney cells successfully resumed metabolism as soon as they were placed in a warm nutrient medium. In Europe, over the next 3 years, there are plans to create the biobank of the Futura network of underground laboratories, where not only bodies and organs will be stored, but also a database containing each patient's health information, genetic profile, digital copies of their brain, and even video recordings of their last days of life. Each such profile is supplemented with test results, family medical history, and personalized algorithms for recovery after thawing. A backup information storage system, located on servers in different countries, provides unique protection for a project of unprecedented scale. Engineers in Texas are testing automated thawing modules, robotic arms, sensors, and instant response to temperature fluctuations. Within the next 5 years, such installations may appear in every modern laboratory to completely eliminate the risk of errors during manual process control. So far, no adult has been successfully brought back from cryosleep, but the number of clinical trials continues to grow. In 2023, 3 institutes in the United States began parallel studies on restoring basic heart functions after a year of freezing. The tests are being conducted on organs, but there are already plans to move on to human trials. Lawmakers and doctors are discussing the creation of international standards for cryopreservation procedures. Stricter protocols, transparency of reports, regular laboratory inspections, and specialist training. Teams of lawyers are working on digital wills that ensure the transfer of rights to the body and data after possible revival. The first clients from Canada and Australia have already started using this. Business corporations are also taking part in the development of freezing technologies. Insurance giants are including cryopreservation in their premium service packages, and DNA banks are offering emergency biomaterial preservation services. Demand for such options increases every year, and in just the last 3 years, the number of cryopreservation contracts has grown by 1.5 times. Modern humanity faces the challenges of the future with the expectation that one of its oldest desires to conquer death will soon cease to be just a dream. Every innovation, every new experience or misstep becomes a contribution to the creation of the next era, where ice is no longer frightening, but offers a chance. The future of eternal life is drawing ever closer, from the first capsules filled with liquid nitrogen to artificial intelligence, which may one day be able to bring a person back from their icy captivity. All that remains is to watch as science rapidly brings the idea of awakening from cryosleep closer to reality.